So, okay, we've got someone at the front here.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Crowhord O'Brody. I'm with a manufacturing company in Galway, Era Composites, which manufactures, among other things, wind turbine blades. Not of the size shown here, and my question would be aimed at John and Andy, who I would take to be the project developers. And my question is, what kind of incentives are you, the people who are going to be buying these turbines and building these projects, going to put in place that Ireland as a country and companies like ours here in Ireland that have technology that we can sell, what kind of incentives are you going to put in place that we get away from the 1 job per megawatt and get up towards the 15 jobs per megawatt, or maybe achieve the Spanish aim of 8 jobs per megawatt? I'm a little bit worried by what one of the other speakers spoke about, the great road network, talked about Dublin Port, talked about the great motorways down to the Midlands. Is that going to be the cop-out? Are we just going to see these blades, turbines, nacelles, everything just shipped down from Dublin Port into the Midlands? Thank you.
Thank you, Conker.
Is this working? Yeah. Well, maybe I'll kick it off, and I know John will probably have a few words to say on this as well. Firstly, it's not just about mainstream incentivizing this. Our plan is to do at least 2.5 gigawatts in lands that we've targeted ourselves, and hopefully we'll collaborate, with John and Boredom, Tim Cowigan and Element, who Tim will be here this afternoon, and other players in this. So, but from a mainstream perspective, as we move into the contracting stage of this, we certainly, as we go to the market looking for suppliers, will be putting part of our criteria as how much local supply is there. Now, but in doing that, local industry has to step up to the challenge as well, because it is about driving down the cost of energy from wind. This is an export opportunity based on the fact that we can be competitive. So, whereas we're prepared to promote the supply chain in Ireland and look for added value from the supply chain and to keep the business here in Ireland, the supply chain must respond to this and be competitive. Our friends, I said earlier, from LM are here, and they have a stand, and I encourage people to talk to Nirmal and his team here today. But their figures would show that if they locate manufacturing here in Ireland for a project of this scale, they can directly employ 300 people, and the knock-on effect is another 500 just for this one blade manufacturing plant. But the real payoff for the industry is they can knock tens of millions off the cost of the build-out of this 5 gigawatts purely by locating here, because it takes so much out of the transportation logistics. So there will be competition, international competition will come here, but if the Irish supply chain stands up for it, mainstream will look to the Irish supply chain in preference, as long as it's competitive.
John?
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think, what companies like Boredom are doing, I would like to think, is creating the market environment here. When we develop projects of this scale and size, the Mount Lucas project, the total investment is 115 million. Now, my board, my shareholder, will rightly hold me to account for that 115 million euro spend in terms of its commerciality, first of all, and in terms of making sure that we buy the best equipment that we can. Now, what the scale of the export opportunity presents, in my view, is it really does present the opportunity for the manufacturing of components of turbines to take place on the island of Ireland. That's the opportunity. We also have to be quite careful in terms of the utilities directives that we are bound by in terms of procurement. We have to run open, competitive procurement processes. That's the law. That is the law. It's actually quite difficult, as Andy knows, to be prescriptive and say, we'll only buy turbines if they're made in Offaly. That's actually illegal. So, notwithstanding that, organisations like Boredom have, through the ages, where we can, sourced materials and labour, etc., locally. And we will continue to do that where we can. Creating the market is what we do. It's up to the supply chain to fall in behind that to ensure that more and more of these jobs land on the island of Ireland.
Thank you, John. Question?
Brendan McGrath, Gay Electric. To Andy and to Pat, in the dissertation there, Andy, you said that the opportune time is 2017 and 2018. Now, my understanding is that in order for a state to export, it has to meet its own targets. And our target at the moment is 40%. All the indications at the moment is that we won't meet our own target on the basis of what's currently being built. So how do we square the circle in terms of being able to export in 2017 when our target is for 2020 and all the indications are that we're not going to meet it? So that's number one. The second is...
Can we just take one question at a time, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fact that you can't export renewables unless you meet your own targets. That's the rules of the game, and so that's the legal environment that we live in. So if Ireland doesn't meet its 40% target or show signs of not meeting it, EU rules would say that we can't export it. But having said that, I sat here about 6 weeks ago on a panel with Pat Rabbit, and in between, he has absolutely assured everyone that we will meet the targets here in Ireland. There's more than enough wind power, as you know, to meet it, and it's not just about the wind power, it's projects. Gate 3 is well oversubscribed, so I think the challenge is not just to build the wind farms, but it's to have the grid in place to make sure that power is on the grid. But the minister and the government are confident, and
the industry isn't. WEA is not confident that it's going to meet the targets. I mean, there was about 70 megawatts built last year, and if you project that forward, there's no way we're going to meet the target.
If I could just say, the European Commission, just to maybe respond to that, the European Commission actually will decide ultimately whether or not a country can or cannot export based on trend lines. Of course, we can't wait till 2020 and then suddenly decide we're going to export. Our understanding is, from discussions with the European Commission, that the Irish government will clearly have to demonstrate in its, I think it's a biannual report that it does in terms of achievement against its RES targets, it will have to demonstrate that it's on a trend line to achieve that. So agree completely, there needs to be a pickup on what's going on domestically to ensure that happens.
Okay, just a second point to Pat in relation to the two designated areas that Offaly has designated, one in the east and one in the west. My concern in relation to that is in relation to cumulative impact and visual impact. At the moment, the easiest way to object to a wind farm is on visual impact. Once it is challenged on visual impact, it goes to Bord Pleanála. Bord Pleanála's record at the moment is 50% turnover of planning. And the biggest single item that they turn a project over on is visual impact. And to build at the scale that we're currently looking at, we talked about the Lucas project at 80 megawatts, 40 turbines. So if we're going to build 2,000 megawatts within the county, this is visual impact that we've never experienced before.
Okay.
And I think that developers would need a clear indication from government that visual impact in areas that have been designated as suitable for wind farms does not become a factor after the event, when all the money has been expended by developers to bring projects through and then have them turn over on the basis of visual impact.
Okay, thank you. Andy?
Yeah, certainly I agree that anybody who's going to invest their money in a project needs to do so in the clearest possible policy environment. And that's the reason why we brought forward our wind energy strategy when we did. And on the slide there, I didn't go through the various layers, but we factored in a whole range of considerations in identifying that. And so far it has served us well. But as I indicated, we are learning from that experience, and in the next iteration of our development plan, we will fine-tune that, and views from the industry, views from the community, and views from the public authority will all inform that. All I can say is that the advice we give the elected members in doing the development plan is that even if it goes ultimately to Board Pleanála, local policy and local practice is still important. And our experience is positive in that regard so far. We have factored in what we think are the correct considerations in designating the wind development areas. But as I said, we are quite happy to learn from the experience to date and review that in our next iteration of the plan. But I agree with you that policy certainty is highly desirable if you're investing money. We certainly, I think, play our part locally. But as I indicated, there are regional and national policy considerations which come into play above that as well. But while I wasn't here to hear Minister Rabbitte address the conference that Andy referred to, I did hear him at the launch of the construction phase of John's project, and he was very clear about his desire to bring the highest level of policy certainty to bear at government level, and I think the current review of the planning guidelines on wind energy are part of that.
Thank you, Andy. We'll just take one more question before the break.
Thanks, Chairman. I think we're all very excited about the
Sorry,
potential.
Tom, a lot of people recognise your voice, but just...
Sorry, Tom Parlin from the Construction Industry Federation.
Thank you.
But in terms of the challenges that are there, and obviously having a customer is a big one, and the commitment by the current Conservative Party to have a referendum about staying within Europe post the next election, would that alter their commitment to renewable energy demand and so on, and would that be a big game changer? Because politics, as we know, is a very strange business to try and do business within, and our current government would appear to be on a bit of a sticky wicket with regard to keeping everyone together on a non-commercial issue altogether in terms of the abortion issue. So, is there a danger politically that our customer could disappear down the tubes?
I certainly wouldn't go head-to-head with you, Tom, on how strange politics can be now. I think you would have to come up here and address people on that. Look, there's no doubt that David Cameron's announced that if he gets a mandate, he will go for a referendum. But that's a little bit of time off. I think what's really of interest at the moment, for the last 2.5 years, we've been going what's called electricity market reform in the UK, and the energy bill that's come out of that, and there's been extensive consultation in the UK on this. We've all participated in it. That energy bill is working its way through Parliament at the moment. It goes through the report stage in May, and it'll take any amendments then, and it'll be passed into law in the autumn. And it will meet that schedule. It's a 3-year gestation period, and it has taken its time. It's frustrated everybody. But the real point I want to make about it is it has been future-proofed for the Energy Bridge project. There is a section of the bill that says the incentive schemes, the so-called contract for differences, from 2017 they moved from the All Rocks scheme to the contract for differences. So it's in the energy bill that the same incentive schemes that will exist after 2017 for renewables in the UK will be available to renewables that come in from outside the jurisdiction. So I think the real key, Tom, is that that gets enshrined in legislation this autumn, and that will be well in advance of any referendum on Europe. So it's not a concern for me, but the real concern is that once that's enshrined in legislation, that's primary legislation. The detail will come then in the secondary legislation about what the tariff structures will be, and it must be a sufficient revenue stream to make returns for investors. But I'm sure it will be. We have a joint venture on the transmission side with the unregulated part of National Grid and REN, who are the transmission system operator in Portugal. But why Portugal? Transmission system operator on a project to bring power to the UK. They're 25% owned by state grid company China, and that's our real partner in this. And on their own, they're the 7th biggest company on the planet. They're the biggest utility on the planet. And we submitted, after nearly 6 months' work, a business case to DEC at their request, Department of Energy and Climate Change in the UK, about 4 weeks ago. And we believe National Grid and REN, State Grid Company China, believe that the business case is made that the export of renewables from Ireland will find a place at scale in the UK, because the cost of energy case makes its own case for the export. So that's a very powerful statement, not just from Mainstream, but from our partners. So, you know, the revenue streams will be there. They'll be enshrined in legislation in the autumn, and that takes the uncertainty of what will happen to European membership out of the equation.
Okay, Andy.